to a place in worship where our hearts are able to better hear and respond to God's Word. While they're being seated, let me tell you that I did see a dentist earlier in the week, and they tried to do the little x-ray thing where they put a little thing, and I have a gag reflex to the end of my tongue. So they shoved this thing in my mouth, and I shoved it back out, and they shoved it back in, and I shoved it out. And then the dentist stepped out, and he's Arabic. I'm not sure what cussing sounds like in Arabic, but I think I was hearing it. And he came back and handed me a referral to see a dental surgeon. I've had bad experiences with dentists because of that gag reflex. The last time I saw a dentist, they gave me Valium and gas to help me relax. And they asked me afterwards, they said, "You're a preacher, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And they said, "You must be a Baptist." And I said, "Why do you say that?" And he said, "Well, when the Episcopalians and the Methodists and the Presbyterians who are allowed to drink come in, it takes a little bit more gas, but you were loopy just like that." Anyways, if you have your Bibles, I invite you to turn to a different text than the one that's listed in the bulletin this morning. Just one chapter over to John chapter 21, beginning with verse 1. After Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee, it happened this way. Simon, Peter, Thomas, Nathanael from Canaan in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two other disciples were together. "I'm going fishing," Simon Peter told them, and they said, "We'll go with you." So they went out and got in the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize it was Jesus. He called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. He said, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some." When they did, they were unable to haul in the net because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It's the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It's the Lord," he wrapped his armor garment around himself. He'd taken it off and jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing a net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals, and there were fish on it and some bread. He said, "Bring some of the fish you just caught." So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. But even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread, and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said. "You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." Let's pray. And now, God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. There are many different styles, many different formats or templates for preaching sermons. All of them start with the biblical text. It is our guide to faith and practice, to the understanding we have of how God worked in days gone by through the prophets and all of the writers of the Scripture, through Jesus and all of the apostles. And the aim in all of these preaching strategies, all of these styles, is to reveal God's goodness and grace, to proclaim the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. And yet each of these styles aims at that target from a different perspective, a different angle. You're probably familiar, if you've been in church for any length of time, with the old 3 points and a poem. The preacher will have 3 points. They all begin with the same letter. So there's alliteration, and then the sermon ends with a rousing rendition of a poem that the preacher had read that week. There's the expository, verse-by-verse kinds of preaching that will take a passage and seek word by word, verse by verse, passage as a whole, to expose or to reveal what that text says about the gospel. There are topical sermons where a pastor will take a subject in the scripture and will use the entire Bible sometimes in order to reveal that topic for your understanding. Sometimes preachers will portray a character, say, taking the story of Peter and all of his encounters with Jesus, and seek to reveal what his character says about the gospel of Christ. There are narrative sermons that seek to retell the biblical story. There are many, many, many other formats. There's one that I don't use very often. It's called the confessional sermon. Now, that's not the preacher getting up and saying, here's all the bad things I did this week. If I were to get up and tell you all the bad things that we did this week, I'd probably be without a job. I don't know. But the confessional sermon takes the preacher's life and illustrates God's movements, the struggles that the preacher has, the challenges, the difficulties, the broken places in his or her life, their humanity. Now, the reason I don't use this very much is because I don't want to be one of those preachers that gets up each week and gives a recap of what's happened in my week prior. I don't want you looking at me. I want you to look and see Jesus. I want to declare the grace of God, that in Christ we are liked and loved, accepted, included, and adopted. But there is a strength to this style or pattern of preaching. First of all, it allows the preacher to experience a bit more passion because he or she's revealing how God has touched their life in some special way. And sometimes the illustrative nature of the preacher's life connects to people because the preacher is, in fact, like everyone else. Just like all of the people in the pew, I have to learn and grow and struggle and deal with hurt and pain and difficulty. So today I'm going to do what's unusual for me, rare for me. I'm going to preach a confessional sermon. I'm not going to tell you about my struggles with dental work, don't worry. What I want you to do is imagine me not standing in a podium, but sitting next to you in a pew, and share some of the things that I've been learning from God. The message is entitled Daddy Issues. I was born on September 5th, 1963 in Middletown, Connecticut. My biological father left my mother and I before I was even a year old. I'll be 50 at my next birthday. I've never met the man. I know that the birth certificate says his name is William James Newport. I asked my mother once, well, why did he leave? She said he wanted to have a daughter. Now I thought to myself, there's a lot of things I'm willing to adjust and change in order to be accepted by someone, but that's a place where I draw a line. I've never even met anyone else with the last name Newport till about 25 years ago. I went half of my life without having anyone else named Newport except my wife and children. I received an invitation to a Newport family gathering from a fellow named Jack Newport. I had no idea who this guy was. Turns out he's a genealogist at Brigham Young University. And so I called the guy to find out. I know that as a Mormon, that genealogy and life history is extremely important. So I called to learn a little bit. I called, he picked up the phone, and I said, "Is this Jack?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Well, this is Bill Newport," and the first thing he said is, "You're mispronouncing your name. It's not Newport, it's Neaporte." And I said, "I've had this name for 25 years. No one's bothered to tell me. I'm going to stick with Newport." We laughed, and I asked him to tell me a little bit about my history. I told him I've never met my biological father. I didn't know anything about the Newports. I wasn't sure where I fit in on the family tree. He wasn't sure either. He said there are actually several William or Bill Newports all across the nation. There was one who was William James, about the right age, so I suspected maybe that's the one who is my father. Then he gave me a generic history of the Newport name. The Newport name has been traced back to the year 1030. My ancestors were Dutch explorers. They would travel along waterways exploring, then they would get tired of exploring, so they would settle down and establish a new port along the waterway. So it sort of means exactly what it sounds like. There are several people with the last name in the Netherlands, in Scotland, and there are even some in Germany with the ancestry. The first who came to the United States was Catherine in 1836. She came along with her sons. They were Catholics when they arrived. They moved westward to Cincinnati. They became Mormon. So as the Baptist preacher, I guess I'm the black sheep in the family. In Germany, there is a Wilhelm Newport. He owns a bus line. You can go on the internet and find it, because all over Frankfurt there are buses walking around or driving around with my name on the side. It's spelled exactly the way I spell it. I've always thought it would be nice to go there and take a ride on one of my buses. Grant Newport is a writer and a producer with several substantial film credits and several substantial television credits. Tom Newport is a professional golfer. He's 84 now, but he was pretty successful on the tour. There is a William James Newport who's not my biological father because he's younger than me. You know how that works out. You have to be older. He's a successful musician. There are actually several accomplished Newports, but I didn't even know that I was a Newport till the 3rd grade. I thought my name was Billy Kaufman. I remember receiving a call to the office. "Would you please send Billy Kaufman to the office?" over the intercom. So I took the pass from the teacher and walked down to the central office. I remember it like it was yesterday. I can see the hallway in my mind. Walked into the office, sat down, thought I was in trouble, didn't know what I'd done, met with some administrators and discovered that I was using the name Billy Kaufman, but I was really not Billy Kaufman. My name was Billy Newport. That my daddy was actually my stepfather. And I remember walking back, 9 years old, walking back to the classroom and thinking to myself, pardon the expression, well, who the hell am I? Who the hell am I? The man that I called Daddy was not my real father. He was my stepdad. I walked back to the class and I fought back tears every step of the way. When I got home, I asked my mom and dad about it. I can't believe that the school would actually bring me to the office, tell me that, and not have contacted my mom and dad. And I talked with my mom about it, and I talked with my dad about it. And I remember saying, I want to be a Kaufman, like my mom and dad, like my brothers. But he refused. He didn't want me to take his name. Imagine what that would do to any 9-year-old child, to the questions that that would bring up in their mind about their identity, about who they were and where they fit in the world. Virtually overnight, I felt disconnected, unwanted, rejected. Not just by my daddy, my stepdad, who wouldn't give me his name, but by the fact that there was a man out there who shared my name, and he wanted nothing to do with me. All of those years, not a card, not a letter, not a call, not a visit. Don't get me wrong, I have some really good memories with my stepdad. My stepdad was old school. He was the kind, he'd been brought up in the kind of home where if food were put on your plate and set in front of you at dinner time, you were expected to eat all of that before you got up from the dinner table. And the one thing I just couldn't stand eating was peas. To this day, I cannot eat peas. Not a big fan of liver and onions either, but peas, no way. And I remember sitting late into the night on many of occasions with a plate of peas sitting in front of me. And waking up the next morning for breakfast, and those darn things were still sitting there on the table waiting for me. One night, my dad, who was getting frustrated, said, "Well, why won't you eat your peas?" And I didn't know what to say, so I said, "They taste green." Well, he thought that was the funniest thing he'd ever heard in his life. He laughed and laughed, told me to get the heck out of here. My dad used more colorful language than I'm going to use this morning. And I never had to eat peas. They were put on the plate in front of me, but every time, "Oh, well, you don't want to eat them because they're green?" So I at least got out of eating the peas. My dad was a big fan of model cars, model anything. He was the kind of guy, I'd fix it halfway, it wasn't quite right, so he would take it away and finish it himself. I never put together a model car until after Gina and I were married. Gina got me a Batmobile. And I put that thing together all by myself just to prove I could do it. My dad was a big fan of remote control planes, all the way up to the time of his death. He loved remote control planes. I remember learning how to ride a motorcycle. My dad told me everything about riding a motorcycle except how to stop the darn thing. I went down the street, turned around, came back to the house, coming into the yard. "How do you stop it?" I said. It went one way, I went another, and the only reason he didn't beat the crud out of me was because the bike did a good job of beating the crud out of my midsection, my groin. And so he just cussed and for the next few weeks tried to bend all of the pieces back in place the way they were supposed to be. And it was the time he bailed me out of jail. Yeah, he bailed me out of jail. On a dare in high school, I stole a bow tie from my Walmart. He had to come get me out of jail. And there were some harsh memories too. I never felt connected to him like my brothers, my stepbrothers, his flesh and blood did. There were occasions when we would be disciplined for doing the same thing wrong. 15, 20 smacks of the belt on my rear end, 1 or 2 on theirs. He was often unfaithful to my mother, even while I was in the house, old enough to know what was going on. He was an alcoholic, and when he drank, he could be emotionally and physically abusive. I won't go into any more details than that. Suffice it to say that we were never close. I always wanted to be close. Spent my life trying to become acceptable, to earn my way and to earn my keep. But it never seemed to be enough. My daddy missed all the important events in my life. He wasn't there when I graduated high school, wasn't there when I graduated college or seminary, wasn't there when Gina and I were married. He was not there for any important event in my life. He'd overcome hell and high water to get to my brother's events, but he was never there for mine. My uncle was there for all of those events. He filled in. The sex talk was given to me by my Sunday school teacher in junior high. The youth minister told me when I had my first date how I should treat a young lady as a gentleman would. I had stand-ins, clergy and teachers and friends. And I love and respect all of those men and so many others. They were there for me. But they were a reminder of what I was missing. I watched the father and son relationship in the Sneed family. That's what I wanted. I wanted the sports dad, the car dad, the fun dad, the dad who couldn't hear what I was saying when I told him what I did wrong. I wanted to have a dad as an adult where I could drop my kids off with Grandpa and they could stay the day with him, and I would know that they would be safe. And I would know that they would feel loved and accepted the way I had felt as a child. But I never had any of that. When my dad died on Good Friday, I wasn't sure how to feel. I was confused. Then I mourned and wept. But it wasn't the loss of what I had. I wish it were. It wasn't the loss of what I had. It was the loss of what I'd always wanted, had never had, and the realization that now I would never have that at all. You understand that? Our relationship did improve over the years, especially the last 10 or 15. I remember on Father's Day, I was 35 years old. I called my dad and we talked for a while. We talked about sports, about NASCAR. My dad was a professional wrestling fan. We went to all of the big events when I was a kid. It's one of the reasons that I still have that as one of my guilty pleasures in life. We talked about all of those things, the small talk. And at the end of the call, he said to me, "Well, son, goodbye. I love you." And I hung up the phone and I started to cry, and Gina said, "What's the matter?" And I told her. He said, "I love you." That's the first time I ever remember him using those words towards me. Several years ago, we went to Florida before I came to be your pastor. We stayed with my dad and his wife and their son, who I'd only seen a few times. I'd always wanted my dad to be proud of me, to recognize me and value me and love me. And I was visiting this man. He was old and tired and sickly and weak. And I watched, and you know what he was doing? Everything he said and everything he did was to try to prove himself to me. He showed me his gun collection, his house, took me to the beach house, showed me his cars. He wanted me to be proud of his old man. And I discovered that my dad was living with the same kinds of insecurities and struggles that I live with. Perhaps some of the insecurities and struggles that we all struggle with. Those identity issues that are a part of all of our lives. See, maybe you had a great dad, but your mom was manipulative and overbearing. Maybe there was another member of your family who did some terrible things to you when you were little. Maybe there was a tragedy and that loved one was taken too soon, and you never got to experience that relationship with them as adult to adult. Maybe there's a spouse who was abusive or distant or unfaithful. There are all sorts of things that confront all of us in our lives. People and circumstances and situations. Maybe it's our parents or the culture we live in. Maybe there are some emotional wounds that are deep-seated in our life. Traumatic events, circumstances, feelings of rejection and abuse, and all of the rest. I understand all of those things. I've experienced them in my life, but in my career as a pastor, in every church, including this one, there have been people who have come and sat in my office and talked to me about the broken places, the empty places, the sorrowful, painful, hurtful places. And when all of these things hit our brokenness, when all of these things hit our humanity, when all of these things hit our individual and corporate sin, They lead to what a theologian friend, Baxter Kruger, calls lying whispers. Whispers of the devil that say to us, you are not. You are not acceptable, not lovable, not beautiful, not important, not valuable, not capable, not good enough, not included, not special, not going to make it. You're not safe, you're not secure, you're not forgivable, you're not able to measure up. You are not worthy. The devil pours all of these "you're not" messages into our lives. Then we begin to take those messages and project it. We take all of that stuff that life tosses at us, and we interpret it through our brokenness and sin, and we project it on the core of who we are and begin to believe it. And we project it onto the world. Somebody's hurt us real bad. We stay stuck in that pain. We never thought we measured up with our dad. We carry that through life, and we think we never measure up anywhere with anyone. The spouse is unfaithful. We get married to someone else, but we never really trust them because we never really trusted the last one. You're abused as a kid, and you say, I'm never going to do that when I grow up and become a grown-up and have my own kids. And then there's a fit of rage that hits out of nowhere, and we find ourselves on the verge of being what we'd always hated. But the real problem is when we take all of this stuff and we project it onto God. Kruger says that we take a paintbrush and we dip it into our own brokenness and pain, and then we use it in broad strokes to create a picture of God. And in our brokenness, we create an image or a picture of God. It's not the true God. It's not the real God. It's not the God that's revealed in Jesus Christ. It is a false God, but is the only God we know. And we interpret life through that lens of that false God. And we imagine there's no way we can ever live up or find acceptance even with God. I've spent a significant part of my life using that kind of lens. Some of you have as well. Seeing God as an ogre, as harsh, as judgmental, as demanding, as exacting, as rigorous, as disapproving and disparaging. And I've taken that image of life and myself and God, and I've carried it with me to school and marriage, into parenting, and sometimes even in church. So I understand a little bit of what you deal with, because I know some of you have those same kinds of issues. And I understand a little bit of what Peter's dealing with in the text that we looked at today. This is a post-Easter, post-resurrection story. Jesus had already appeared to Jesus had already appeared to Peter, This is Jesus' third appearance. It's after Easter. Where is Peter after Easter? He's fishing, and evidently he's doing it half nude. I don't know what to make of that except to say it's kind of weird. They'd fished all night, they'd caught nothing. Jesus appeared, they didn't know it was him. Try casting your net on the other side of the boat. That's about the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life, but they did it. The fish aren't over here, they're right over here. They tossed the net, and sure enough, there's a catch. The disciple whom Jesus loved, tradition says that's John, notices. Look, that's Jesus over there. So Peter is ashamed. What does he do? He throws his clothes on and he jumps into the water. The other disciples carry the fish to shore. They arrive to where Jesus is. He's already got fish cooking on the fire. He says to Peter as Peter comes ashore, go get some of those fish that you caught and bring them here. There's bread and fish, and Jesus feeds them. And then they sit down, and 3 times, the number of times that Peter had betrayed and rejected Jesus. 3 times he says, Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. Do you love me? Take care of my sheep. Do you love me? Feed my sheep. Imagine how Peter is feeling, insecure. He'd rejected Jesus, betrayed him, watched him die. He's ashamed, he runs and hides. But Jesus won't let him get away. Jesus won't let him hide. He pursues Peter with divine grace. He reminds him he's still called. He tells him, in essence, you're still liked and loved, accepted, included, and adopted. Jesus is doing what he's always done. He's revealing the character and nature and identity of God. If you've seen me, he says, you've seen the Father. He's fleshing out God's personality among us. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. He's declaring and displaying the goodness of grace of God, saying that he's revealing God's glory. Peter had taken that brush. He dipped it into his pain, into his failure, into his sin. He dipped it in and he began to paint a picture of himself as unacceptable, unworthy, as shameful and unaccepted to God. Peter had painted a picture of Jesus Father and of God with that brush. And he'd painted it in his own sin and brokenness and despair. And Jesus shows up and he rips the brush out of Peter's hand. He throws it on the ground. He takes a brush and he begins to paint a picture of God with his love and grace. And in that picture, we're included. In that picture, we're welcome. Jesus is the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. And then Jesus paints us into the picture. He paints us into his very life. We are painted into Christ, painted into grace. We're painted as people who are liked and loved, accepted, included, and adopted. That's who I really am. That's who I really am. I will never have and never had what I needed from my dad. But even if we'd had the best of relationships, that would still be true. Because my dad is not God. And we need to be reminded of that when we deal with the people around us. If you're waiting for someone to do something special for you to make your life complete, you're waiting for someone to do something they're not capable of doing because they're not God. We were created to find life in and from God. We were created to find our source of life in God. Your mom and daddy can't give you wholeness. Your husband and wife can't do it. Your children can't make your life complete. If we expect anyone else to do what only God will do, we're looking to the wrong source and we're putting too much pressure on the other. I've discovered that I'm in Jesus. I'm filled with the Spirit. And I have a loving Papa. I don't have to earn my way in. I'm liked and valued. I don't have to work to earn my keep. I'm loved totally. I don't have to gain affection. I'm fully accepted. I don't have to make myself worthy. I'm included at the table. I don't have to earn the name Christian because I'm adopted. That's my name because my daddy accepted me, my daddy in heaven. And so all of this is true for you as well. I invite you to take a faith journey with me. Not a face journey, a faith journey with me. A journey that starts with repentance. Repentance from painting a picture of God with the brushes of our pain. Repentance of seeing God, a God painted through our sin and brokenness. Repentance of seeing God as an angry ogre who wants to take us down. Repent of all that and allow yourself to see God the way Jesus reveals him, the way Jesus paints him. You see, Jesus paints and embodies, incarnates, and fleshes out God as a loving parent who includes us. And then when you take that attitude of repentance, when you stop seeing God through your pain and sin and start seeing God the way Jesus painted him, then enter into a attitude of faith. Declare your intention to trust this God completely, to live by faith in Christ, to live from God's love rather than trying to earn it. Offer your life in love to the one who offered his life in love for you. And in that love, you will know that you are liked, that you are loved wholly and completely, that you are accepted, included, and adopted, that you do, in fact, have a daddy, Abba, who loves you with all of his heart. And you don't have to do a thing to get that love. He gives it to you because that's who he is. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our hymn of response is number 565.